Welcome to Kitchen Pedagogy. In this video, I'm going to talk about the real challenge, the everyday challenge of trying to teach every single student in your class at the same time, and how you can have some key prompts to make you check whether or not that's happening or not. Now, you might think, of course, you're teaching everybody, but in fact, the dynamics of classrooms are very complex. And it's easy to run through some routines that actually allow quite a number of students to check out, to opt out, and not think very hard, even if others are. So if you're really making everybody be involved, there are some things you've got to be checking. And first of all, you've got to be checking that everyone is thinking. I think part of that is just down to that conscious checking, that you're thinking about it, you're scanning the room, you're giving yourself time to do that, thinking, let me just see, is everybody doing this? Is everybody participating? And questioning routines like cold calling, for example, where when you ask the question, you explicitly take time to scan and say, right, is everybody with me? Is everyone thinking this question is for them? So that you've made them all think. Of course, you can tell a task where you're going to get a response on mini whiteboards, so they have to produce their own answer. And there you're checking, are they doing it themselves, or is there any chance they might be borrowing the answer from someone else? And if you're doing something like think, pair, share, you're making sure that the question is structured so that they all have to think, and that you're definitely going to select either one of the pair so that they're all doing the thinking. Or you're going to do a show call and you're supervising very, very actively, going around, circulating, checking table by table that everyone's doing the task. If you're not systematic about it and you're just hoping that out there in the room, the students are thinking, participating, probably some of them aren't. And I observe a lot of lessons where that's explicitly what's happening, that some of the students are just waiting to see what the answers are and then copying stuff down in their book that they don't always fully understand. So that's the first thing. Is everybody thinking? And how do I know? And have I run the room to make it so that they all have to think? The second one is, are they all making sense of what I'm saying? So I've explained something, I've done some worked examples, I've modeled a writing process, for example. I've even, played a video. Do I know if they made sense of it? Are they all able to make meaning from the material that I'm teaching in their own head? Well, how do I know that? Blank faces aren't going to tell me that. So I've got to have these responsive, interactive techniques which sample the class and say, well, let's hear from you then. I think I've explained it. What do you think it meant to you? And again, how do I do that with all of them? Well, I think things like pair talk, where you say, run through that explanation with your partner, take it in turns, see if you could agreed with each other, and then sampling the room from that, or using whole class response like mini whiteboards as part of it. Anything which allows you to see what the students have understood from what you've said. And a few sort of short questions might not be enough. So for example, if I was to teach you something like explaining the phases of the moon, or how Durdle Door forms from coastal erosion processes, or what's happening in Act 3, Scene 2 of Macbeth, and I've explained it to you, I need to get you to then process that and see if that's made sense to you. So I've got to give you time to do that. Let's have some sort of download time and thinking it through. And I think that can be done by sketching notes or talking to your partner before we get into sort of quiz type questions. Just, has that made sense to you? Let's check. And that's an explicit phase of the lesson. I've explained it. Has that made sense to you? Let's explore that. And you have to be ready to find out that it didn't make sense in the same way that you were explaining it. So partly what you're doing is just sampling a few responses, not just one, several, so that you can hear back to yourself as a teacher, how did that go? And then adjust your explanation in light of that. And the third thing is practice. It's quite often the case that lessons are busy, and that part of practicing things gets squeezed out. So I've explained it to you. Have you been able to rehearse that knowledge a few times to kind of get used to using language? Has everybody done that? I've even sat in, languages lessons, French lessons, where the teachers taught a phrase and sampled the class to see who can say it, but not everybody has said it. So you've been in a lesson where, not even in a languages lesson, where not every single student has practiced the vocabulary. And certainly in any technical subject where you've got technical vocabulary, if you want the students to learn that vocabulary, they'll need to use it. And so getting students to talk through using language with choral repetition or paired talk or writing things down and you're checking they're all doing it. So being really explicit and systematic in checking, is everybody practicing, is really, really important. So those are the 3 checks. Is everybody thinking? Is everybody making sense of this, and how do I know that? And is everybody practicing? And if you're asking yourself that question at various points in the lesson and then intervening if you don't think that's happening, then you're more likely to be teaching all of the students and all of them benefiting from the inputs that you deliver. And it starts simply from you asking yourself that question about the all. A few students doing well isn't enough. If there are 30 students and 20 of them are getting on with it fine, what about those 10? Who are they? Can you identify them? And it's the checking, at least in your head, that about the all versus just some is the start to getting that right.